Hello and welcome back. Now you have text and event query ready. And now you're ready to deploy to Heroku. But deploying the code with all the configuration variables in it would not be safe. We need to make configuration safe. And how do we do this? Well, we'll go through the process in this video. What do we need to do? We need to modify the configuration settings. And what we'll do is have different configurations for local server than for the online server, that is Heroku server. What we'll do is have a keys file for the local server like we do now, and on Heroku we'll put configuration variables to environment variables. Go to code editor. In the config folder we'll create another two files, one for development and one for the server. I'll name the first one dev.js, like this. Now create another file. I'll call it prod.js as production, like this. Now I'll copy the content of the keys file into development file. We've said that for development we'll have variables in the configuration file, so we can just copy them. But before we forget, let's go to git ignore and add this file to be ignored by Git. Therefore, add config/dev.js, like this. Now it will be ignored by Git. Okay, cool. What about production? Well, what I want to do in production is to read settings from environment variables. Therefore, I'll copy the keys file to production.js, but what I'll do is I'll read project ID from environment variable. I'll change these to process env Google_project_ID, like this. Now we need to add this variable to Heroku. That's why we need to log into Heroku, go to your app and to settings. Here in the settings, click reveal config vars. This is the interface for adding environment variable, and I'll add project ID in here. In the key, copy the name. That's Google Project ID. And in the value, copy the value, get it from dev.js, like this. Click add. And we can move to the next one. I'll call this one process.env.dialogflow_session_id. And again, I'll copy it to environment variables. Dialogflow session ID. And the value comes from dev.js. And one more. This one will become process.env.dialogflow_language_code. Okay, copy it to Heroku, and I'll copy this value from dev.js. Now we have all three variables here, but we're not finished yet. Now we'll come to the problem. Remember Google Application Credentials environment variable? Well, in it is the path to JSON file. The problem is we cannot add the path to file in here, and we cannot copy the file contents into this variable either. It won't work. So I found a solution for you. What we'll do is we'll pass the credentials to the client differently. I'll show you how. Just follow me. I'll go to dev.js. What I'll do is add some of the values from JSON file. What we need for authentication is client email and private key. You have them both in the JSON file you've downloaded. Here they are. So go to dev.js and add another property. This one will be Google client email. Add empty string. Okay. Paste in the value from JSON file. this one here. Okay? And now the second property, the private key. I'll call the property Google private key. Add empty string. And now we need to paste this whole key in here. Copy this whole thing, the whole key, and paste it to deo.js, like this. And now something important. I've made this mistake before, so I can warn you. Look at my editor, what it did. Well, it added escape string here at the new line signs. Backslash and n is a sign for new line. An original key has only one backslash. But editor adds an escape string to every backslash. If your editor does the same thing, you need to remove them. If you don't, this will cause an error. Well, it did for me. That's why I'm removing these double backslashes. Only one needs to stay. Okay? Will you do the same? Well, do it. Okay, I'm removing them. There are a lot of them. Be sure and look through all the key that you've changed them all. I'll be back when I double check. Okay, now I'll go to chatbot.js file. And first I'll write the project ID to constant, const project ID equals config dot Google project ID, like this. And now we need an object called credentials with client email and client key. Const credentials will be an object with property client underscore email. This will be read from config dot Google client email. The second property will be private underscore key. And this will be read from config dot Google private key. Okay, good. Now both will be passed to sessions client, but as an object. Pass curly braces project ID, comma, credentials, curly braces to sessions ID. This is actually a shorter syntax that came with the new JavaScript version. The long one would be project ID is project ID, credentials key, and credentials value. Maybe you are more familiar with this one, but let's write less if we can. The benefit of passing credentials in this way is also that we don't have to set Google application credentials in the local machine, while the configuration will be safer on the server. All the configuration will be in environment variables, none in the files. And we did not yet add the two new variables to Heroku. First add them to prod.js. First one will be Google client email. And now the Heroku variable name, process.env dot Google underscore client underscore email. And we're missing the key, Google private key. Will be read from process.env dot Google underscore private underscore key. Okay, now we need to add them to Heroku. First the email, copy the key, like this. And now the value, like this. And lastly, the key. First copy the key name, so Google private key. Now the value. Be careful to copy the whole string. Okay. Have you got it? Now, before we deploy, we need to somehow instruct the application what is the right configuration file. Heroku adds an environment variable by default. It's called node_env and it's set to production. So what we'll do is check for the variable and load the according config file. So go to keys and write if process.env dot node_env equals production. Now we are in production, therefore return the prod set of keys. Module.exports equals require prod. Else we are in development, therefore return development keys. Module.exports is require dev. The right set of keys will be loaded based on the node environment variable. Cool. We're now ready to deploy to Heroku. We've taken care of loading the right keys. Production keys will be read from environment variables, which will make them secure. And we've changed authentication by providing the necessary information by passing it to sessions client object. Great. Follow me to the next video where we'll deploy to Heroku. See you soon. Bye bye.